This video is dedicated to all the women who have genuinely suffered and endured real trauma and oppression. It also serves as a caution to those who blur the lines between true victimhood and the weaponization of it for personal gain. May we always honor the truth and support those who truly need it.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Have you ever felt like something wasn't quite right, but you couldn't explain why? Like you were being pulled into something. A smile, a gesture, a soft voice. And yet deep down, your instincts whispered, be careful. Now most people would dismiss that feeling. Let's say you're overthinking, but real men wouldn't. In fact, they'd say you're finally beginning to see something the world doesn't want you to see. Because real men didn't believe everything sweet was innocent. They believed that behind every social ritual, every polite gesture, every charming face, there's a deeper instinct at play. One that isn't always safe. One that isn't always conscious. And one that we are actually trained to ignore. They called it will to power. And they believed it didn't just belong to women. Women too have their own form of power. Only theirs is quieter, smoother, more hidden. And that's exactly what makes it so dangerous. This isn't a war between men and women. No. It's not about blame. No. It's about waking up. Because if you don't understand how power actually works, if you keep thinking it only looks like violence, control, or money, you'll miss the more subtle forms, the emotional ones, the psychological ones, the ones that don't need to raise their voice to control a room. Real men warned us about this many years ago, but no one really listens. They call these men bitter, misogynist, crazy. But maybe they were just early, way ahead of us, the modern men. Way ahead of the current modern simping men, specifically Muslim men. Because in today's world, where softness is sold as innocence and charm is packaged as harmless, maybe the danger isn't in what we see, but in what we don't question. We're going to talk about the side of female nature that no one really dares to touch. Not to demonize it, not to glorify it, but to see it clearly. Let us begin. Bismillah. Look, a woman, she smiles, and the room softens. Eyes turn, voice is lowered, tension fades. It looks harmless, beautiful even. But real men see something else. They see a mask. Not one made just of lies, but there's something deeper in the instinct, in the fitra, if we can call it that really. Or is it in the corruption of the fitra maybe? They believed what we call feminine charm isn't necessarily weakness. It's a tool, a performance shaped by survival, actually, by centuries of needing to influence without actual frontline force. And if you only see the surface, you'll misunderstand everything. Back in the time where women weren't actually allowed open power, well, women learned to move differently through suggestion, to operate from the shadows, seduction, emotional sensitivity, in a sense, manipulation, strategy, quiet, precise, effective. What looks like innocence can often be instinct dressed in beauty. Not because women are just deceptive. It's because, well, that's kind of how they seem to be in general. Maybe it's their nature, I don't know. Maybe when the Prophet warned us that this is the biggest fitna, the most harmful fitna, that hadith needs to be critically examined deeply. I think people just run over it and just dismiss it. I think people, they don't understand the hadith about the ben rib. They don't understand the hadith about you're like the women of Yusuf alayhi salam. They don't understand the hadith of fearing women and fearing this dunya. I think people just dismiss them and just scheme over it just because of fear of the backlash for criticizing or daring to even raise criticism against women. Now keep in mind that I didn't make these hadith, nor did you, nor did the people, nor did the misogynists, nor did Red Pill, nor did psychologists, nor did Nietzsche, nor did Freud, nor did anyone else. These were hadith revealed to the Prophet ﷺ, authentic hadith. From where? From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because hadith, authentic ones, are a form of wahi. Now, charm is not just attraction, it's control. And the most dangerous part, it doesn't look dangerous at all. In today's world, where masks still exist, what happened is it's been romanticized, branded, filtered into our feeds. Sweetness is sold as virtue, softness as moral superiority. And men, especially young men, are being told to surrender to it without question. To trust appearances over real information, over proof and evidence, even instinct. To lower their guard in the name of kindness. But real men ask, what if this kindness is a form of power? What if the danger isn't an aggression, but an influence that can't be seen? It's not about just blaming women, guys. It's about waking up to dynamics we've been trained to ignore. In today's society, especially 2025, we've been trained to ignore and overlook and never to question. God forbid that a man dares to question a woman today. He's going to be taken down, cancelled. But you see, because if power always wore a crown or carried a weapon, it would be easy to be seen. But when power smiles, when it flirts, when it pretends not to be powered at all, that's when it shapes you the most. You see, real men aren't afraid of violence. They're afraid of charm. Because charm doesn't force you, it invites you. And this is exactly why it works. We've been told a lie that men seek power and women seek love or nurture. One dominates, one nurtures. But real men don't see it that way. They believe both men and women today are fighting for power, what we called before the two-men problem. Men were given power from Allah, and today women are fighting them for that power that was not given to them, claiming that they deserve it because at some point in history they were victims. And now the victimization is weaponized And the claim is now, we won the power, you guys step down. To ignore this truth is to walk blindly into manipulation disguised as emotion. The difference isn't in the desire, it's in the delivery, guys. Men were taught to chase status, territory, achievements. Their power is loud, visible. Men have always been wars and so many businesses and building empires and so on. But women, especially in the eyes of real men, are shaped by different rules. Well, for a long time forbidden from open confrontation, they master the indirect tactic. They learn to read, to feel emotions, to mirror desires. And over time, this became their strength, a type of psychological warfare the world still refuses to name and to acknowledge. Because when power doesn't look like power, it's harder to resist. We live in a time where the narrative is simple. If a woman is hurt, she must be a victim. If she cries, she must be honest. If she leaves, it's because she was mistreated. But real men refuse to accept this simplicity. They believe people are far more complex, women included. That beneath the surface of tenderness, there can be fierce calculation. A power not less real than a man's muscle, but far more difficult to detect. And here's the danger. When you ignore this form of power, you become vulnerable to it. You assume there's no game, and so you never learn how to play. Real men don't really hate women. They simply see them clearly for who they are. Not as soft, but strategic. Not as passive, but precise. And if you keep thinking emotional power is less than real physical strength, well, you lose battles you don't even realize you're in to begin with. Seduction is not an accident. It's not just chemistry, timing. It's targeted, precise, deeply intentional. Real men don't see it as something shallow or playful. They see it as a weapon design, a strategy woven into beauty, voice, vulnerability, and unpredictability. They believe seduction is the language of power written in silence. And the most dangerous part, the person using it often doesn't even know they're doing it. SubhanAllah. We like to think attraction is personal, but you're drawn to someone because of who they are. Real men would say, no, you're being moved by instincts older than your mind. You're being pulled by something deeper, something you can't even explain sometimes. Female seduction, in real men's views, it's not about morality. It's not about morality. It's not about love. It's about selection, about influence, about controlling outcomes in a world where direct control, to them anyway, was not allowed. It was not given. Women don't have that. Divinely, they've never been given it. Think about it. Why do certain gestures, playing with the hair, subtle glances, soft laughter, affect people so deeply, especially men, so deeply, even women? Why does beauty, especially when paired with mystery, seem to override reason and rationale? It's because seduction isn't asking for attention, it's guiding it. Real men believe this is not just a conscious act, it's more like subconscious. But there is some volition, there is some meaning. In today's world, seduction has moved forward, has really developed. Now it comes through the screen, through perfectly curated posts, subtle poses. The suggestion of vulnerability mixed with unattainability. But it's not fake, it's powerful. And if you think you're immune to it, you've already lost. Because real men warn about this as a trick, warning about it as design, not just to attract, but to direct you. And when you ignore the purpose behind the pull, you confuse emotion for truth. And that confusion can cost you everything, especially as a man on a mission. We don't just desire women. It seems like today they've become pedestalized. A'udhu billah, a form of worship almost. May Allah protect. We write songs, poems, entire, a'udhu billah, movements and ideologies around the idea of the sacred feminine. But real men can see through that. They see the idealization not as love, but as an illusion, a dangerous illusion, because when you place someone above reality, you no longer see them for who they really are. You project onto them, you create a fantasy, and fantasies have a price. Real men warn that most seductive lie isn't told by women, it's told by men themselves actually. The lie that says she's perfect, she's different, she's the one. The lie that says that she would never hurt me. This isn't love, it's blindness. It's a refusal to confront complexity. And real men know when a man turns a woman into a goddess, a'udhu billah. He forgets she's human, that she has mistakes. He cannot see her. He refuses to see her mistakes. He stops. He cannot see her contradictions, her shadow, her evil. And in doing so, he makes himself vulnerable. Not to her necessarily, but to his own delusion. Well, to her as well, to her cruelty. But more so to his own delusion. And in 2025, this delusion thrives. You see it every time a man falls for a woman he barely knows. Every time he confuses beauty with virtue. Men think that beautiful women are good. Every time he's more in love with the idea of her than the reality. That's not romance. That's surrender, not to her, but to his own need to be saved, to be vulnerable. Real men believe that this is why so many young men collapse emotionally. They get into depression, not because women really destroy them, but because their own illusions do. And to realize is to control. You think you're doing her, putting her, pedestalizing her, but you're really avoiding yourself. Avoiding the truth, avoiding risk. Because real connection isn't built on perfection, it's built on presence, on reality. Real men didn't want men to necessarily stop having emotions or feelings for women. They wanted them to stop dreaming and fantasizing, idealizing. Because once you wake up, man, love is no longer blind, it's chosen. And that's where real strength begins, when you can choose your emotions and how to let them go and how much to give and how much to hold back. That's a kind of control that doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, threaten, or force it. It cries, it withdraws, it accuses without words. Real men see it clearly. When emotions become a tool, well, they stop being honest. Real men believed one of the most dangerous forms of power is the emotional kind, the kind that appears soft on the surface but cuts deep beneath. Not because it's just loud, because it's silent, because it wraps control in the appearance of vulnerability. In a culture that teaches us to protect feelings at all costs, emotional expression is sacred. But real men are not fooled by the tears. They know that emotions, when used without awareness, becomes a game. A way to win without even appearing to fight. A way to dominate while claiming victimhood. And this is the main point. Claiming victimhood. This is the modern Muslim woman. And women in general. And what makes it so effective? That no one dares to question it. Because the moment you do, you're cold. You're cruel. You're the problem. You're a narcissist. You're evil. You're gaslighting. You're manipulated. You've seen this before. The person who suddenly grows distant without explaining. The one who cries at the right time, not because they're broken, but because it resets the dynamic. The guilt, the confusion, the pressure to fix things, it all falls on you as a man. And the more you try to solve it, the deeper you fall into the trap. Real men say, you're not dealing with emotions, my man. You're dealing with strategy, wearing an emotional face. And you are being manipulated by tears, by makeup, by trauma, by sadness, by screaming loud, by broadcasting all your problems in front of all the big audience that takes a knee in front of women. This isn't about blaming women. It's about seeing that when society gives one side the emotional high ground, it also gives them invisible leverage, real power. Real men believe that unchecked emotions can become tyranny, a form of power that hides behind truth. In 2025, where emotions are currency, the warning has never been more urgent. Because if you can't name the game, you're already playing it and losing. There's a kind of danger that doesn't explode. It builds slowly, silently. It hides behind politeness, behind smiles, good intentions. Real men called it resentment, a deep resentment that grows when someone suppresses their true instinct for too long. And they believe that in societies where women were told to always be nice, supposedly, always be gentle and always be good, this resentment didn't go away. You just learn how to wear a mask. See, when someone plays on the moral high ground, not because they believe in it, but because it gives them control, you see it when bitterness is disguised as boundaries, when envy hides behind principle, when judgment sounds like care. Real men warn that when desire is denied, it doesn't disappear, it rots. And the rot comes back out at the end, not through open conflict, but through passive resistance, coldness, guilt-tripping, and unspoken punishment. In our modern world, the pressure on women to appear virtuous is still quite massive. They're still there, right? So what happens? Well, they return as shadows. They mask it. They manipulate it. Manipulation disguised as modesty. This is dangerous. Real men see this as a force. And this is why some of the most destructive dynamics feel clean on the surface, because they're powered by emotions that were never allowed to be felt. Look, we still glorify the image of a good woman, but real men have to ask, at what cost? When you suppress the wolf to wear the lamb's skin, it doesn't make you harmless. It just makes the bite harder to see. It just makes the bite harder to see. This isn't about becoming stoic or just shutting down. It's deeper than that. You have to understand that as a man in 2025, you've become very feminine. And this femininity, if it takes over you, you're going to take yourself down. You're going to wound yourself. You're going to be sensitive and react to everything. You're more confused than ever in 2025 as a man. You're praised for being sensitive, but punished for being weak. You're told to express, but not too much. You're told to be open, but never needy. To be vulnerable, but then you get destroyed. In that storm of contradiction, this feminine energy grows wild. So if you don't face that so-called feminine energy is being injected into you, become a puppet, overthinking, over-explaining, overreacting. Look, this is not just about emotions and rejecting emotions. It's about discipline, understanding, owning it. Because when a man integrates this feminine energy into him, he stops being a man. He collapses. But when he understands his masculine energy, he takes over and he knows how to control his energy. He no longer collapses at the first sign of disapproval. No. Or needs women to validate him. No. He becomes on a mission. After this illusion dies, after the charm fades, after the projections collapses, a heavy kind of silence settles in. Real men believe that This is real control. In today's world, detachment is misunderstood sometimes. Okay, it's not that detachment just makes you superior, but it makes you free. The moment you stop needing to be understood is the moment you become untouchable. The moment you care only about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about you, you become untouchable. In a moment where, in a country, in a world, in a global village, where cancel culture thrives, when you stop caring, you become untouchable. And when the world can no longer bait you with the same old tricks, you're not just awake, you're dangerous now. Not because you hurt others, but because you no longer let anyone hurt you. And this is a reason that men are able to stand in their ground. Look, guys, this is not just being above women and all that. No, it's about no longer being beneath yourself. It's about seeing through the smoke of flattery, of guilt, of emotional leverage, and still choosing connection, but only on your terms. You are given leadership. You are given manhood. You are the real man. Real men's ultimate warning. It's not just about women. This video is not just about women. It's about the cost of never knowing who you are without women. That you need women to know who you are and to validate yourself. And look, once you do know who you are without them, you start asking simple questions, real ones, the kind that no one expects, the kind that clear the room, the kind that sounds like this. If you liked me so much, then why, as a woman, did you try to change me? Think about that.